Welcome back to our story today. I am so glad you have returned to our little circle. Please, find a comfortable place to sit. Settle into your chair. Perhaps wrap a warm blanket around your shoulders and let the world outside fade away. Imagine we are sitting together once again by our warm, glowing campfire. The wood is popping and crackling, sending orange embers swirling up toward the vast, dark sky. The air is cool and crisp, but here, by the fire, it is safe and warm. Tonight, here at StoryPath English, I want to tell you a story that sounds like a legend, yet every word of it is true. It is a story about a girl who had no power, no education, and no weapons, but who managed to change the history of the world forever. It is the story of Joan of Arc, the farm girl who led an army, the girl who heard voices from heaven, and the girl who gave her life for a vision. It is a story of incredible courage, deep faith, and a mystery that still fascinates us 600 years later. Imagine a small village in eastern France called Domrémy. The year is 1412. The village is surrounded by green rolling hills and thick forests. Life here is simple. People wake up with the sun, they tend to their sheep, and they pray in the small stone church. Among these people is a young girl named Joan. She is like any other girl in the village. She helps her mother with the spinning, she sews, and she spends her days in the fields watching the animals. She cannot read or write, but she has a heart full of kindness. But France at this time is not a peaceful place. For almost 100 years, France and England have been at war, a conflict we now call the 100 Years' War. The land is torn apart. Soldiers roam the countryside, burning farms and stealing food. People are tired, hungry, and hopeless. The French king has lost his crown, and the English are winning. It feels like the end of France. Have you ever felt like everything around you was falling apart? That was the world Joan was born into. When Joan was about 13 years old, something extraordinary happened. It was a warm summer noon in her father's garden. Suddenly, a bright light appeared, more brilliant than the sun. Out of the light came a voice. Joan was terrified, but the voice was gentle. It told her to be a good girl and to go to church often. Over time, the voices came more frequently. She identified them as Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret. At first, they spoke of simple things, but as Joan grew older, the message became much more dangerous. The voices told her that she was the one chosen by God to save France. They told her she must leave her village, find the true king of France, and lead an army to drive the English away. Imagine being a 16-year-old girl in a world where women had no voice and no power. Imagine being told that you, a shepherdess, must become a general. Joan was frightened. "I am a poor girl," she told the voices. "I do not know how to ride a horse or lead a war." But the voices replied, "It is God who commands it." Have you ever felt a calling so strong that you couldn't ignore it, even if it scared you? Joan couldn't ignore hers. In 1428, she left her home. She went to a nearby town and asked a local commander for an escort to see the king. At first, the commander laughed at her. "Take her home and give her a good beating," he said. But Joan did not leave. She waited. She spoke with such conviction and such honesty that people began to listen. There was a prophecy in France at that time. France will be lost by a woman and saved by a maiden. People began to wonder, could this girl be the maiden? Hosi, Eswai, Ka, Ha? Finally, the commander gave in. He gave Joan a sword and a small group of men. To travel safely through enemy territory, Joan cut her hair short and dressed in men's clothes, a choice that would later be used against her. They traveled for 11 days, through cold rain and dangerous forests, until they reached the castle of Chinon, where the Dauphin, Charles VII, the man who should be king, was hiding. When Joan arrived, Charles wanted to test her. He dressed in plain clothes and hid among his courtiers, while another man sat on the throne. But when Joan entered the room, she didn't look at the man on the throne. She walked straight to Charles, knelt before him, and said, "God give you life, gentle king." Charles was stunned. How could this farm girl know who he was? She spoke to him privately and told him secrets only he knew. Charles was convinced. He gave her armor, a horse, and a banner. He sent her to the city of Orléans, which was surrounded by the English army. Imagine the sight of her, a 17-year-old girl, dressed in shining white armor, riding a white horse, carrying a banner with the image of Christ. She didn't carry a sword to kill. She carried her banner to lead. When she arrived at Orléans, the French soldiers were tired and ready to surrender. But when they saw Joan, something changed. Her presence was like a spark in a dry forest. She gave them hope. She didn't stay in the back. She climbed the ladders, she stood on the walls, and she shouted encouragement. In just 9 days, the English army, which had been there for months, retreated. The Maid of Orléans had won her first victory. After Orléans, Joan's fame spread like wildfire. The English were terrified. They thought she was a witch using black magic. The French thought she was a saint. Joan then led Charles across enemy lands to the city of Reims, the traditional place where French kings were crowned. There, in a magnificent cathedral filled with the sound of trumpets and the smell of incense, Charles VII was crowned King of France. Joan stood beside him, her banner flying high. She had done what the voices asked. She had saved the throne of France. But success in a royal court is often followed by jealousy and politics. Now that Charles was king, he became cautious. He didn't want to fight anymore. He wanted to talk. Joan, however, knew the war wasn't over. She wanted to free Paris. But without the king's full support, her luck began to change. In May 1430, during a small battle at Compiègne, Joan stayed behind to make sure all her soldiers got safely back inside the city gates. But the gates were closed too early. Joan was trapped outside. She was pulled from her horse and captured by the Burgundians, who were allies of the English. This is the saddest part of the story. Joan waited for the king she had crowned to rescue her. She waited for Charles VII to offer a ransom or send an army. But Charles did nothing. He stayed in his palace and left Joan to her fate. The Burgundians sold her to the English for 10,000 gold pieces. The English wanted to kill her, but they couldn't just execute a prisoner of war. They needed to prove she was a witch or a heretic. If they could prove she was evil, then the king she crowned would be seen as a puppet of the devil. In 1431, Joan was taken to the city of Rouen for a trial. It was not a fair trial. She was held in a dark, cold prison cell, chained to a wooden beam. She was questioned for months by dozens of the most learned men, bishops, and lawyers who tried to trip her up with difficult questions about religion. But Joan, the girl who couldn't read, answered them with a wisdom that shocked everyone. Once they asked her, "Are you in God's grace?" This was a trap. If she said yes, she was being arrogant. If she said no, she was admitting she was a sinner. Joan calmly replied, "If I am not, May God put me there, and if I am, may God so keep me." The judges were silent. They couldn't believe her intelligence. Have you ever been treated unfairly or had people doubt your truth? Joan stood alone against the most powerful men in the land, and she never wavered. Finally, they condemned her. They used the fact that she wore men's clothes and her claim that she heard voices as proof that she was a heretic. On the 30th of May, 1431, at the age of 19, Joan was led to the old market square in Rouen. She was wearing a simple white dress. They tied her to a tall stake and piled wood beneath her. Even at the end, she didn't show hatred. She asked for a cross. An English soldier made a small one out of 2 sticks and gave it to her. A priest held a tall church cross before her eyes so she could see it through the smoke. As the flames rose, she didn't scream in anger. She shouted the name Jesus over and over again. It is said that even the English executioner was weeping. "We are lost," he supposedly whispered, "for we have burned a saint." After she died, they threw her ashes into the Seine River so that no one could keep her relics. They wanted her to be forgotten. But you cannot burn a vision, and you cannot drown a memory. Joan's death did exactly what the English didn't want. It united France. Her courage inspired the French people to fight with a new strength. Within 20 years, the English were driven out of France for good. 25 years after her death, a new trial was held. Her mother and her brothers traveled to Rome to clear her name. The Pope opened the case, and after listening to the people of her village and the soldiers who fought with her, he declared her innocent. He called her a martyr. Hundreds of years later, in 1920, she was officially made a saint by the Catholic Church. Today, Joan of Arc is a symbol for everyone. She is a symbol of France, but she is also a symbol for anyone who feels small and unheard. She teaches us that you don't need a high position or a lot of money to do great things. You only need a clear heart and the courage to stand by your truth, even when the whole world is against you. When you think of Joan now, don't just think of the fire. Think of the girl in the garden in Domrémy. Think of the girl who dared to believe that a shepherdess could lead an army. History is full of kings and generals with big names, but often the most powerful stories belong to the ones who started with nothing. The Taj Mahal was a monument of love. The pyramids were a monument of permanence. Joan of Arc is a monument of the human spirit. She shows us that one person with enough faith and enough courage can move mountains. As our campfire burns low and the night becomes quiet, I hope this story stays with you. I hope it reminds you that within you there is a strength you might not yet know. Life will have its battles, and it will have its trials, but the light of a brave soul can never be truly extinguished. Thank you for sitting with me tonight at StoryPath English. Thank you for listening to the story of the Maid of Orléans. The fire is fading into soft red embers now, and the stars are shifting in the sky. It is time to rest. Close your eyes and imagine the green hills of France and a young girl looking up at the sky, ready to change the world. May you have the courage to follow your own voices, and may you build something beautiful in your own life. Sleep well, my friends, and I will see you on our next journey down the story path. Good night.